Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. This is Mark Turi. I just wanted to start off by saying a big thank you to everyone who watched my last live stream, which was on last Saturday. The date, of course, was the 26th of October. I got over 500 views, close to 550 views of that, and I know that might not seem like much, but for a small channel like myself, who's just sort of starting, I'm at 547 views, and I've got about 100, almost 130 subscribers now. So thank you, everyone. That was really fun. Of course, we did um, Russian minorities, ethnic Russian minorities in the former Soviet Union states. And if you'd like to take a look at that, please go ahead. Also, as I say every week, if you like my content, please give a like to this video and please subscribe to this channel. I am, again, trying to grow. I have been doing some really, moderate growth, but growth indeed from the past couple, maybe month or two. And yeah, now I have about 130 subscribers. Some of my videos are getting over 100, over 150 views now. My videos on Germany did pretty well as far as a small channel like this. So I just hope that I can give you more of what you guys want and continue into the future. I want to first say before I start here, hello to Clearwater Chad. If you're out there, how are you? He said hello about 20 minutes ago. But if you're out there, hi, thanks for coming and supporting my channel. Hello to Irish Mart. It was good seeing you earlier on Maryland's stream. Thanks for being here. Thanks very much for being here. I'll get into what I did yesterday in just a moment. Joe DeCeppo, my friend and exalted few, one of the chosen ones. How are you today, Joe? I hope you're doing well. I still think we should have a Gertie Pete and grip calzone etiquette lessons. I think would be absolutely hysterical. We should do a powwow soon. And Pete Anderson, how are you, buddy? How's it going? All the way there in California. I hope the weather was pretty good today. Was, because I always like to translate for my American friends here, all of our American friends. Today was actually really unseasonably warm again. And I'm sure you hate me saying that, but well, it was 19 degrees Celsius, 66 degrees. And in Budapest, we get a nice breeze. So it wasn't like sweltering hot, even though sometimes 19, 20 degrees can still be pretty hot. We had a nice breeze today, and especially the last couple weeks. Although, starting by the weekend and starting towards November, it's going to be going down to around 10 degrees Celsius. So that's somewhere around 50, 55 degrees, which is around normal for, the fall autumn. So I just hope, um, you know, it's, well, I don't like the snow. I don't like cold, but at least in Budapest, it's pretty mild. Yeah, and there we go. And seasonally warm again. Wow, almost as if we fucked up the climate. Well, yes, but not according to Big Oil. It's just cycles according to them. But screw them anyway. Um, yeah, so yesterday I just wanted to thank anyone or everyone who was on Kelly Copter's channel. We played Werewolves, which they will be playing in about an hour's time. So if you want to, we go over an hour or anything, and you want to drop off to go over there, don't worry about it. If you want to stay, I'm going to go over after this and probably just hang out for a little while and see what I missed first, and then loop on over. But I had a good time, but I was eliminated third, so I was very was very very disappointed. I voted only in one round, and I voted for the other Kelly, who was the werewolf, and I knew it. I had a feeling she was, and then the two werewolves, I guess, decided to to hunt me down and track me down. But I had some good one-liners. As I mentioned, Irish Mart would know if they were following earlier. We called our town McTown. So I just kept saying Mick words. So the first night I was enjoying McNuggets at McDonald's in McTown, and before I went to bed, I read Macbeth, and people thought that was pretty funny. I just come up with this stuff off the top of my head. I don't know why. I've said it before. Sometimes when I do Pete, he's just coming up with all this crap. A lot of it is my my improv training, which I did like when I was like 18, 20, 22 years old in college. And then like, yeah, it's just whatever. With Pete, I'll just give you guys a little insight onto Pete. I really want to do him sometime soon again. Um, he's a little bit based on my dad because my dad was kind of a get rich quick scheme guy, or my mom used to call them harebrained schemes. So he would come home one day. He worked in a dealership. So he'd come home one day and he'd try to convince my mom to move to Australia. So to set up a store in Australia where we would sell VHS and Betamax tapes. And that was like in the late 80s. And then, another one, we had to move to another place to sell other things. So there's a little bit of that in there. But that just, acting stuff, right? You just pull from what you know. And I guess I know how to be a scam artist and a one-line zinger. I don't know. Iris says my only complaint is evenings are too dark. I vote next year. We move the clocks forward a few hours instead of back. Yeah, that's another thing. Um, we ended daylight savings time in Europe last week, and I think our friends in North America are doing it this week. So it might be a little bit off. So I think that I'm in the Greenwich Means Time plus one. So they call that the Central Time Zone or the Central Europe Time Zone or the whatever it's called. And then the UK is the same. It's 8 p.m. For them, it's 9 p.m. for me, but I want to say it's 1 o'clock in Pacific time. So, and Pete, you can look that if that's what it is. I think it's 1 p.m. now, and then for Chad, I think you're 4 p.m. But next week, I think Saturday. By the way, and I'll talk about what I'll do on Saturday in a moment. But I think the times are the same, and then when we come back next week, like next week now on Wednesday, and then the clocks will be back to 12, 3, 8, and 9, because now it's 1, 4, 8, and 9. Anyway, I don't know why we have daylight savings time, but that's a whole other thing. Doesn't really matter, I guess. I don't know. Whatever. Werewolves, you did better than Clearwater Chad, but Doug would be shaking his head. You don't watch my video. Oh, R.I.P. Doug. No offense taken. You were on a roll. I was trying. I mean, usually when I get into a big group, especially online, I'm a little shy at first. It took me that one round to open up a little because I was like, there's a lot of people. I didn't know anybody. I mean, I've never met anyone in real life. Just Kelly and who I've only spoken to online, and then Farrell Cheryl, who I've also spoken to online. She's been around my channel, so I didn't know anybody else, but it was nice to meet everybody. And yeah, it was good. So I was just a little shy at first, and then as soon as I started, opening up a bit more, then I got eaten by werewolves. Which is that a lesson? I don't know. Anyway, before we get into the topic today, and I'll try to wrap it up around 10 o'clock again, just in case you want to migrate over to Kelly's channel to watch werewolves, with no problem with that as well. On Saturday, I have a PowerPoint, and this Saturday will be a PowerPoint on my top 6, because 5 was too little, 7 was too much, and also kind of an odd number. But my top 6 favorite episodes of the original Twilight Zone, which of course was narrated, written, and produced by Rod Serling, a complete genius and master of the English language. Wonderful, one of my all-time writing heroes. And we're going to look at the top six. I'll get into little bits here. I'll give a synopsis of the episode. We'll talk about the cast and if the cast had come back to different episodes, and then I'll just go through why I like them so much. I will give spoiler alerts. It is a 60-plus-year-old show, and so like I will have to give away twist endings, so I'm hoping that if you've watched a bunch of Twilight Zone episodes in the past, you'll already know what's happening. But again, the show started in 1959, it ended in 1964, so between 60 and 65 years, I think that's enough time that we can spoil some stuff and be okay. And then we'll put up a vote after that because we'll vote on a topic for next week. I'll give a couple of options. I'm actually this week because we skipped one. I'll give maybe three options, and we can figure that out. And again, I'll sort of talk about it a little bit more. And then after that, of course, next Wednesday, so a week from today, we'll be back to our regular times without any daylight savings. So it'll be a lot more steam rolled out. Trying to think if there's anything else. We have werewolves. We have the Twilight Zone, which, by the way, there's an episode called The Howling Man. I will give you a spoiler alert that I will talk about that in my honorable mentions. That's the only one I'm going to talk about. So there we have two things that go together. We talked about the weather. All right, let's talk about voting because everybody knows, of course, that next Tuesday, or is it Tuesday or Wednesday? When is the election, everyone? Is it the 5th or the 6th? Somebody let me know in the United States. I wanna say it's the 5th, but then again, I wanna say it's the 6th. So I'm a little bit off there. Anyway, it's next week. I don't wanna talk about politics specifically. I don't wanna talk about who you're gonna vote for. If you go out and vote, that's the number one thing. Being in a democracy, whether it's an absolutely flawless, perfect democracy or what they call here in Hungary an illiberal democracy, at least you get to vote. Your vote is your say in the government. It's not perfect, but it's the best system we have. And so, whomever you're voting for, that doesn't matter. Everyone is welcome here. I certainly have my biases, my experiences, and so forth. I've switched my voting parties back and forth over the years, but whatever, right? We're all human, and we can disagree, and agree to disagree, and disagree to agree. But what I want to talk about are elections, actual voting processes, which I think is something that we often miss when we discuss politics because we get too much into the weeds about partisan stuff and culture war things. And I don't want to talk about. I want to talk about the actual systems, the electoral systems and the voting systems in three countries, which I have firsthand experiences in Canada and Hungary. And I have kind of a secondhand experience and a kind of a learning experience when it comes to the US. So, as most of you know, I'm born and raised in Canada. I'm a natural born US citizen. No, I'm a natural born Canadian citizen. We'll edit that out for the for ICE and the TSA and the NSA and all the SAs out there. Uh, I'm a I'm a natural born Canadian citizen. Put that on the record because I was born in Toronto. And the first election I ever voted in, I was 19 years old, and I'll go through some of that. As of 2008, 2008, 2009, I received my full Hungarian citizenship. And since 2010, I have voted in every federal election. And just this past summer, I voted for the first time in both the EU Parliament election, which was around in July. And then I also voted in the mayoral, or whatever you want to call it, election in Budapest. Of course, I lived in the United States for 2.5 years, from January of 2009 until June of 2011. Of course, I was only on a student visa, F1 student visa, could not vote, had no interest in voting because I was only a temporary resident. But of course, I was around a lot of Americans who voted in the California recall election. I believe it was in 2010. May have been a recall election. I think it had to do with Schwarzenegger. Pretty sure that's when it was. And many of my friends would sit down and tell me how they vote and what all the proclamations were about, and or propositions and so forth. And then I ended up taking a California, I think it was called a California State Poli Sci class, to learn about how all the different systems of government in California. And then I did take an American high school level American civics class, which was really interesting, because I'd never learned that before. Now, again, I'm not going to really get into the actual nitty gritty of separation of powers in the Congress and the Senate, but we're going to go over some similarities and some differences between these systems. Okay. So going back to Canada, my home and native land, the type of government that we have in Canada is referred to as a parliamentary democracy. And what I think is very interesting about Canada is, of course, we have two leaders in Canada, right? We have a head of state, and then we have a prime minister. And because Canada is a part of the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth, or I'm not sure how you could say, I guess it's called the British Commonwealth. The British monarch is Canada's head of state. So right now, of course, um, that is that is King Charles III, who I like to call King Sausage Fingers. I'm not a monarchist, so you know, yeah. But before that, of course, was Queen Elizabeth II, and of course now King Charles III. And it was Queen Elizabeth, I think, has been the queen was the queen for 70 years, somewhere around there. So when I was born, she was the queen. Um, and then, of course, just last year, the year before, she died, and now we've had Charles III. So in that sense, okay, um, Canadians, much like those in the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth countries, Commonwealth nations in the world, we do not vote on who our head of state is. That would be, if we did that, would then Canada and the UK and other places would be a republic, okay, which ties us into both Hungary and the United States, the word republic. But as a parliamentary democracy, we have this leader who is a hereditary monarchy or heretical monarchy. Again, it goes from birth line. So, whoever the firstborn is, which again now is you know, Charles III and his fingers. Um, and however, we do elect a prime minister. So some Americans and some people out there who live in a parliamentary system, and I say Americans because like the parliament is not exactly like the electoral college. Of course, it's not, but it's kind of like similar in the sense that a province in Canada, we have 10 provinces. So British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland and Labrador, Prince Edward Island, and we have three territories, which is Nunavut, the Northwest Territory, and Yukon. And they will be divided, of course, into electoral districts. And those electoral districts, in the end, I want to say, and I'm going to look up how many actual numbers there are, of course, are divided into seats. So let me just look up the Canadian House of Commons, and I don't mean the geese, I mean the actual House of Commons here, although I think they sound the same. The House of Commons in Canada has how many seats? How many seats? 338. I should know that, but of course, why would I? The Liberals have 153. Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition, the Conservative Party, has 119. The Black Québécois, which is a Quebec separatist movement, 33. The New Democrats, 25. Greens, 2. Independents, 4. Vacant, 2. Alrighty then, so 338. And again, we have what's called the first past the post system. So that simply means that whomever has the most seats wins. This would be in contrast to some places like in Australia or Italy or even in Israel, where there's like constant elections every year or two, because their parliamentary systems in those cases, they have parliaments. I don't think Italy is. No, Italy's not a monarchy. Australia is part of the Commonwealth, and then Israel is a republic, I think. But they have coalition building, so the parties have to get together, form a coalition. There's also something going on right now in Austria, where Austria's government can't form a coalition. It's a whole hoopla. But essentially, even if the Liberal Party only takes 30 to 40% of that 338, they win. Okay, pretty basic. So when I would show up in the polling booths, or the I guess you could say the polling stations, and I've also worked for our organizations in Canada, which is called uh, Ontario Vote, Ontario Vote, Canada Votes, Ontario Votes. Anyway, they're the a nonpartisan organizations that run our elections at the federal level, which would be Elections Canada, pardon me, and Elections Ontario. And I have worked as what they call poll clerks and deputy returning officer, which is very simple. You know, you go into a gymnasium or a library. I've worked at different places and churches and whatever. You would go up to the polling clerk. They check off your name if you're on the list. You show some ID, and then you get from you get your ballot. You go behind the thing. You make the mark, whatever. But in Canada, it's very different when I'm going to explain about how we do in Canada and Hungary, because each time which I've been voting, I think I counted that I voted in 11 or 12 federal and provincial elections. Federal of course, at the level of Canada. Provincial in Ontario, where I'm from, which has a different number of seats. We have our own provincial parliament. So I've voted in total around 11 or 12 times in all of them since the age of 19. I missed the last couple because the last one, I should say, because I live here. And I think when I lived in the US, I may have missed one. Anyway, regardless, we get one ballot, and it's actually a pretty simple, almost reduced ballot. It's only one. I've ever only gotten one, and it just says the name of the person who's running, the initials of the party. So in Canada, we have the Liberal Party. So I mentioned before the Conservative Party, the New Democratic Party. The Bloc Québécois only runs in for federal elections, and they only run in Quebec. So in Ontario, we don't have that. And then the Green Party. And then what we have fringe parties and independents. Fringe are like the communists and animal rights and libertarians and Marxist Leninists and whatever. And then of course independence. And then all you do is you make a marking. It could be a check mark, an X or whatever, and you just put the one ballot in. So it's a really, really simple kind of thing. And most people know who they're voting for. I don't think I've ever experienced anyone who's really ever had any problems. And in some ways, it's an interesting system because as we get forward to Hungary and the US, the next thing you're going to notice in a republic is that there are more ballots and there's a lot more going on in your voting, which I prefer. But I know a lot of people in Canada don't like that. They prefer just having the one ballot with the name of the person, the name of the party, and a box. And you just put an X or a check mark or whatever. You color in the line or whatever, and you put it in the ballot, and then that's it. So to move to Hungary, uh, in Hungary, of course, is a parliamentary republic. So we have what we call our National Assembly, which is here in Budapest. I've been to it before. It's the Parliament building. If you're ever in this city, it's a wonderful place. It's actually very beautiful. Just like I've been to the Canadian Parliament building in Ottawa, and it's the architecture in Hungary is gorgeous and stuff. The building is located right on the metro. It's also on the Danube River. It's just really, really beautiful building. And what I have enjoyed about voting in Hungary is, so when I became a citizen, as I mentioned in 2008, 2009, so I voted in proxy, meaning I was abroad. So I had to go to a consulate, the Hungarian consulate in Toronto, and I voted. Excuse me, I should say the first time I voted was in 2010. I was living in Los Angeles. So I went to the Hungarian consulate in Los Angeles, which was on Wilshire and Sepulveda near the 405. And I was living in Santa Monica close by, so I just walked. I think it took 15 minutes. I went and I voted. So it was 2010, 2014 back in Canada, 2020 back in Canada, and then just recently in 2022. So the first three times, it was that simple of a ballot. I could only really vote on the federal level. So it was basically who were the leaders of each party, and I just put a check mark or whatever, and that was it, right? Because I wasn't living um, in Hungary, so I wasn't able to vote for who would be a potential member of parliament or whatever. And also, when we get into propositions, I'll explain how that's different from the United States and also how that differs from Canada. However, so that's what I did. So I go to the consulate in Los Angeles. They give me one ballot of whom basically do you want to be prime minister. I filled that in. The subsequent times, 2014 and 20, that was in Toronto. And then, or excuse me, I have my 2000 wasn't 2020, it was 2018. I'm bad at math. I apologize. So 2010 LA, 2014 18 in Toronto, and then 2022 I was living here. So because I'm living here, and I had been living here for about a year, roughly, I think maybe a little less than a year, but still a year. I went and got, just like everyone else, as I'm sure if anyone votes, you get a voting registration card and you get, your location, and it was just around the corner from where I live. So I just went to um, a building. I mean, I guess I don't know how I'd even what I would call it. It's I guess a government office. And so I waited in line a few minutes. Again, just a 2-minute walk from literally 2-minute walk around the corner from where I live. And I was handed a stack of ballots for and I've never I knew about this because, of course, I had talked to my family. I'm a member of a political party, so I had a bunch of information. But it was actually kind of cool to get a couple stacks of different ballots, because we don't do that in Canada. We don't have propositions. In Canada, we sometimes have referendums. The biggest one being the Quebec referendum, whether or not Quebec should split in 1995 and leave Canada, and that was 59 no, I guess, and 47. Anyway, 51% of Canadians said Quebec should stay, so it's still a province. 49% said it should leave. And then I think when I was living in Berlin around 2007, there was a referendum in the province of Ontario regarding whether we should do first past the post or proportional representation. Proportional representation is more that coalition building stuff, and it was vetoed out. So we still have the first past the post. I know that other provinces, like British Columbia, will have different, provincial referendums, and so will other provinces. But in my experience, really, we don't have these things. And so when I was given what they call my lists, they really don't call it a ballot, they call it lists. I had one list, which was the one ballot, which I normally would have, which is who do you want to be your prime minister? And it was in 2022, we had the government coalition and an opposition coalition, and then a bunch of smaller parties. So I made my vote. And then, of course, we had the member of parliament in my electoral district. and we had the government coalition, and then we had, of course, the opposition coalition, and then a number of smaller parties. However, we were asked 3 different questions for propositions. Now, this was a really, I think, a really sick propositions. They were asking us whether or not that we should be teaching gender to children. Whatever your beliefs are, please understand this is, to me, my opinion. I rejected that in the sense that they wanted to make laws to which they did because it won to prevent the teaching of gender to children. I oppose that. I think teaching gender, it's like it was just this hoopla. They had a bunch of like George Soros, propaganda and all this kind of stuff. So I voted whatever I voted. I can't remember if I voted yes or no on all three, but essentially I rejected the proposition that there should be laws to protect children from gender. And that also means things like, having LGBTQ books in libraries and stuff like this. It was really kind of a heinous law, but it went through anyway. So those were my stacks. So I had in total I had the one for prime minister, the one for my MP, and then 3, so 5 in total. I've never voted that much in my life. And of course, in Hungarian, it didn't really matter. I had, um, stuff translated, like, with Google, and I kind of knew already. I knew who I wanted to vote for the prime minister, and then again, also for my MP, so that was easy. I went with whatever the grouping I went with. And then the second part, I knew to say either igen, which is yes in Hungarian, or nem, which is no. And again, I think I might have voted no, which was to prevent, to reject those gender laws or whatever you call them. But I could be mixing it up. But that was what I voted for. So unfortunately, as I said, those 3 different propositions went through, and now, like, libraries and stuff can't really, books about the LGBTQ community, gender studies, and so forth. It's really restricted here, and I just it's not my favorite. However, those that are American will know that when you go to the, ballot, and please, if anyone is American, I know Pete has you've written some stuff here, I'm gonna get there in a second. But I know in your elections, you vote directly on who the president is, right? So you can vote for coming next week either, Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, and then whomever's running for like the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, and whatever else. So in that sense, it's actually the same as Hungary, but not the same as Canada. Because remember, the Canadian head of state is an unelected monarch. So if, for example, if we didn't have Canada didn't have the king, then what would normally happen is you'd have one vote, a direct popular vote on who you want to be the head of state, and then the parliament, okay, would be voted by seats of the House and MPs, and that's how a lot of like EU, parliamentary republics do that. In Hungary, we're a little different. We have to be different. So our prime minister is the head of state, and the president is elected, okay, or appointed, I should say, by the prime minister to represent essentially the parliament. But they're kind of like the vice president in one sense. It's weird. Anyway, of course, in the United States, popular vote doesn't really count because you have the electoral college. I've always thought, what about this to my American friends? Imagine the popular vote is the one that elects the president, and then like the electoral college elects the vice president or make up another name, because you could have both if you wanted to. I just think if you're going to have one, you should just have the popular vote, in my opinion. The electoral college is just outdated, in my opinion. But like, if you're going to have the electoral college, just like, I don't know, just elect the vice president or something. Because again, in a lot of parliamentary republics, you do have a popular vote for the head of state, and then the parliament elects the prime minister. So it's actually kind of nice because in some cases you'll find in some of these parliamentary republics, um, although of course the president and the prime minister could be of the same party, sometimes they're not of the same party. And so, anyways, it's an interesting thing to think about. In the United States, I find you're very heavy on propositions, and I've taken a look at some of my friends who are in California, and just some of the and Pete will know some of the propositions that you guys get to vote for is incredible. When as far as direct democracy, I think there's a little bit of you know um, push and pull there because I know in a lot of states people always want their taxes to be lowered, but then they always want public services and transportation to be increased. And this is the conundrum of direct democracy, where we don't have direct democracy pretty much at all in Canada. We have a representative democracy, which again has its push and pull. Um, as I mentioned too, in Hungary we have these national uh, 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 pro, um, proclamations and propositions, but it's not as much as in the United States. Especially, I know in certain states will have more than the other. But I think that's maybe where it gets too into the weeds where like, "Hey, we're voting to lower our taxes, but we also want more things that the taxes pay for." You know what I mean? So it's like, "Huh?" So that's a little weird. In Canada, we just put it all to the hands of our representatives. And of course, they screw up just as much as we do, but that's Canada for you. I will say one of the interesting things about propositions in Hungary is we do have propositions. What I find is incredibly interesting is so we have districts here in Budapest, and districts are kind of like mini cities. And these mini cities will have squares, like actual, like Times Square or whatever, like an actual what used to be a square back in the day. And if we go with our ID card or whatever, um, we go to the major square that's in our district, and then we can vote on the proposition. And it's usually outdoor. They usually just put up a bunch of tents or whatever and stuff like that. So again, that's where it's a little different from the United States, because when you're voting on propositions, you're probably doing it as a part of a larger election, or if it's an independent proposition, I think it's treated kind of like an election where you'll go to like, a polling station, which is normally in a church, a community center, a library, an arena or whatever. I'm not really sure exactly how it works 100% of the US, but I think that's actually kind of cool. And I think that, when I was learning American civics again in California poli sci, there's a lot of in and outs that I can go through all day. But I really think again, there's this big, like, really, really large and big spectrum here, this scale where on Canada, we have a very limited, I think it's a very simple and a very limited type of election, one ballot, that's it. Now, if you're a member of a party, it doesn't really give you any ups in Canada, except for the fact that when the parties hold their conventions, you can vote for who you want to be the leader. And that usually goes on, over the span of several days. And we'll sometimes have rank votings and rounds of voting to get to the one person who's going to represent everyone. So usually starts with a large pool of potential candidates, very similar to the primaries in the United States, and it gets slim and slim and slimmer until after a weekend or something, or maybe a week, you get this one candidate. In Hungary, when we become party members, uh, we get what are called party lists, which I think is a cool, cool, cool thing. So if you're the member of a party, um, you're on the party's list, and I don't know if they do it anymore, but I know that I was told by people in the party that I belong to that because you're a member of a party, when you show up to the polling stations, uh, you get ballots that are already filled in. Okay, and something like this. Maybe I've got the details wrong, but I think they're either, like, already filled in for the party that you have voted for already, but now that I'm thinking about that, I don't know how legal that is. So I can't remember exactly what they do, but I think you get, like, I don't know, you get, like, special stuff, of course, you get meetings and whatever. Now I can't remember now if I'm right or wrong on that. Anyway, and then I know, of course, in the United States, it's very similar. You register at the DMV or whatever to become a Republican, Democrat, etc., and then you can vote in the primaries. And it's very similar again in Hungary and so forth. So I think the filled-in ballot ones. I think the filled-in ballot ones might. I don't know if it's around anymore, but the idea being that if you show up to a polling station and you're a member of political party A, then you're going to vote for them anyway. So you get ballots that I think are, if they're not already filled in, there's something different about there's something different anyway. Again, because I think pre-filling in ballots might be a bit weird. Anyway, doesn't really matter. It's all the devil's in the details. But let me go up to some of the questions. I have a bunch of stuff starred here, and then I'll get into the EU election in just a moment. Pete says video on daylight savings. I know some reasons for it. I've heard some health drawbacks too. California voted to end it, but the California State Assembly didn't follow this. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I'm not sure. I mean, who knows? I don't know. So sorry, Canada, not my king. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Believe me, sausage fingers. It's not mine. California Governor Gray Davis was recalled and Schwarzenegger became governor, mostly due to the electoral rollback. Okay. And then I think if it wasn't the recall election, I think was it in 2010, there was a gubernatorial election, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say it was 2010, because I remember living there and living through a California election. Arizona doesn't have daylight savings time. Sane people in there. Well, not really, but you know what I'm saying. Um, actually do like Arizona. I've been to Arizona a couple times. It's actually really fun. Good Mexican food. Um, we fill in the bubble, right, with a black or blue pen, usually voting on multiple races, yeah, or propositions. Current election had president, senator, school board, county seats, and proposition. 8 of them, yeah. hmm Voted by mail, notified that my ballot was mailed to me, received, and counted. That's good. The envelopes are light blue for Democrats and pink for Republicans. Interesting. That's cool. Propositions are a waste of time. Yeah. An excuse for the politicians to have the public do their job and ignore them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Referendums and propositions end up usually just going by the status quo anyway. Propositions for the government to fund things and provide less discretionary spending. Yes, we do need to protect Joe against geography. I agree. No one should know what an earthquake is or a tundra, especially in Scientology, because the volcanoes of Hawaii existed 76 million years ago when the evil Lord Xenu came in. So if Hubbard said it, it's true. And if it isn't true, it isn't written. Correct, you vote for the candidate. It was very controversial that Biden won the nomination in each state, but being forced to withdraw by his party. Then he had the money in the Biden Harris camp. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Uh, that election next week is going to be one humdinger. Um, so they felt they had to go with Harris. Yeah. And before the Democratic National Convention, they did some behind the scenes work to make Harris the nominee. Prop 8 was against gay marriage. Prop 187 deny illegal immigrants services. Yikes. Next, I'll be teaching kids about what is that? Sedimentary rock? I need a lot more context on that, Joe. That's a smart word. A tabloid told me kids are identifying as Oxbow. What? Oxbow Lake? What? You're You're British, the master of the English language, man. I don't understand half the words you say. And I understand what you're saying. I just don't understand what you're saying right now. Prop 13 limited the amount of property tax on 1% of the sale or price of property, which can increase much per year. So if you bought a long time ago, you don't have to pay as much. And then depending if it's an open primary, okay, right, you can vote, right, okay. The candidate, if it's a closed primary, that's right, right. A person's estate, if it's an open system, that's right, yeah. Open or closed primary. Plus you have the delegates and all that. The Democrats have the super delegates, Republicans have the delegates. But yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of similarities, being in a democracy, regardless if even if it's called a republic, there's still democracy. If you join a party, you do get to at least vote for who you want to be your party leader, and then in general, they may become the head of the country or something, um, and so on. And that's quite in common. Canada, again, mentioning very little when it comes to proposition, very little direct democracy. Whereas in Hungary, it's kind of the middle between the United States, which has so much, and Hungary, which does have. We do have some, but not as much. I mean, the idea of asking about tax increases, for example, or decreases is not something I don't think we do in Hungary or Canada. That's something that happens in the United States, usually at the state level, of course, because you have a state income tax, and then to do with roads and stuff and whatnot. I will say too, when we do municipal elections, so these are, and I think the UK is like this as well, Joe. You can correct me, but in Canada, mayors, what we call councillors of the ward councillors, city councils, and so forth, they don't run for parliament, or excuse me, they don't run with political parties, so they're nonpartisan. So that's not like the United States where the mayor of New York is a Democrat, Republican, running or whatever. Giuliani was, a Republican, and so forth. So you're running with your party, even, you know, city councils and stuff like that in the counties and whatnot. But in Canada, then the ballot is just the name of the person. And so we have mayors, ward councillors, city councilors, and we do have school trustees, of course, and so forth. So I think that might be the same from the UK. I prefer the American way, and we also have the same in Hungary. Our mayors and so forth. We have district mayors and the mayor of Budapest, and I'll get into that in a moment because past summer was the EU election, and then also the local elections. But in Canada, I kind of prefer if they would actually have a party affiliation. But just briefly, because again, we're getting close to 10 o'clock, and I would like to sort of jump over to Kelly's werewolves. Is that this past summer? So, and let me look when it was. I'm sure it was in June because I remember that because I was away, and I'm sure I was away in June. Um, the EU Parliament election, and I voted uh, prior. I had to vote prior because on the day I was away. It took place, yeah, June the 9th, between June the 6th and June the 9th, okay. So 6th of June, 9th of June, I was away, went before. So in the EU Parliament, there's something like 700 and what, 20 seats or something. And each country is in that regard like almost like, a state or province. And then within them, different electoral districts. And so when I voted early, I voted at a polling station. Was it a polling station? Yes, it was a polling station. I think it was a polling station. Um, I think it was a polling station. But regardless, maybe they didn't count my vote now. No, I went to the place actually that was just I mentioned just before it, this civic office or whatever, around the corner from where I live. I got the ballot, and what was weird is in Budapest, not only did we have the EU election, but on the same day with the same ballots, we had the local elections. And so in that case, I had to vote for the member of parliament of the EU. I had to vote for Budapest's mayor. I had to vote for the mayor of my district, because every district has a mayor, and like 2 or 3 other lists or ballots, and I forget what the other ones were. But in the end, uh, you can vote for the same party 5 times, but kind of what I like about in Hungary is you can kind of mix and match. Like, I actually, the party that I belong to, um, they ran for the EU, so I voted for them there. I voted for the mayor who was part of another party. The district mayor, my district mayor, my party wasn't the party I'm a member of wasn't running a candidate, so they said to support that person, and that person's an independent. And then in the other 2 or 3, I voted for across party lines. So it was actually kind of cool to be able to be like, no, I'm going to choose, one person from that group, another person from that group. So in the end, it was pretty cool. I really liked it, and unfortunately, the party that I belonged to had 2 young women that were members of EU Parliament, and they unfortunately did not, win their terms, so they were removed. They didn't win, and now, parties I don't the party that I don't really like. Listen, if you know me, you know the parties I like and don't like, especially Joe. All that is a secret. Um, we've talked about it before. But, yeah, a lot of their candidates, went through. And of course, we could get into EU Parliament. Maybe I'll do that another time too. We could do that in a couple weeks from now, and talk about the EU Parliament and the EU election, because it's very fascinating. It's a lot of interesting things. And yes, geography. I'm sure the geography. I'm sure I learned that whatever that rock was. I'm sure. I mean, I did learn, sedimentary rocks. I mean, if you are OT3, I should say, you do learn that the volcanoes of Hawaii existed 76 million years ago when dinosaurs were on the planet. Were they on the planet back then? Anyway, please, Yeah. I'm a historian. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a geologist. I'm not an astronomer or an astrologist. I'm just a lonely old historian. And, that's all I do. So if I forget things, I'm a little forgetful. Um, but yeah, Pete says here we don't elect our president. The Electoral College does. Each state, yeah, has rules on how delegates are assigned. California is all or nothing. So 50.1% of the vote gets, yeah, 54 delegates, and you need 217 to win. Okay, no dinosaurs. Only, yes, no dinosaurs. Only the wandering lost souls of bad science fiction authors. Also, if you really want to get technical, okay, dinosaurs and human beings lived together, and cavemen used to ride dinosaurs, according to some people. I don't agree with that, but according to some people, and you know what? If dinosaurs ever come back, I've told you before about my fear. It's called, what's it called? Megalomania? No, that's the one where you're what did I say? Megalomania. That's the one where you're like an egotistical monster, and I'm not that yet. Um, and I mean that yet because, the cult thing, but it's the fear of like large things, a fear of large objects. It's a fear of large objects. What is this called? Yeah, megalophobia, not megalomania. That was Hubbard. I have what's called megalophobia. So I don't know if I would be able to actually live in a place where dinosaurs, because they're so freaking big, and they also move around and like, oh, I'm getting uncomfortable. But I would like to ride one. I mean, maybe Jurassic Park will be real, and maybe they will clone them. And I'm just saying. But anyway, I wish for my American friends, because I'll see you all on Saturday, and then again, I won't see you for another week. But you know, man, I don't know what's going to happen with the election. Um, I really hope that on either side, people just don't freak out and try another January 6th or do rioting or whether it's a an attack on the Capitol, but also there's plenty of cities all over the United States where when an election doesn't happen, it's just looting, rioting, small businesses, big businesses get destroyed, and I don't know, that's not good for anybody, you know. You know what I mean? Like I just hope that people just go, okay, well, the person that we wanted lost, and now we have 4 years to run a better campaign, whomever it is. Because, a lot of people have voted already. A lot of these things are out of our hands. It's not the end of the world. Um, I survived when I was in college, George W. Bush's election in 2000, which was, probably should have gone to Gore, but he conceded. 2004, Bush, pretty much destroyed John Kerry. 2008, Barack Obama. 12, Barack Obama. 16, Trump. 20, Biden, and we'll see. And, I think it's interesting when people say that this upcoming election is the most important election of all time. Every election is important. And it seems like every 4 years, every election in America is, you know, more important than the last one. And they're just important in general. So I don't know. I'm just hoping, for the best for everyone. I know that the U.S., like Canada, like Hungary, we're divided by the people in the urban centers and the people in the rural centers, and that divide is becoming stronger. But just you got 4 years, okay? You've got 4 more years, and whomever it is, just I hope they do an actually good job. That's all we can hope for now. Yeah, some people are looking for excuse. I cannot run. Of course, I will not run. Well, first of all, I will not run in Canadian politics because I'm too what's the word? Rude, abrupt, direct, and because I'm considered to be rude in Canada. Directness is very rude in Canada. I will go far. In Hungary, I don't speak the language, and of course, you know, I wasn't born in the United States, so which is a shame, really. Um, the irony of crossing political lines because of the distaste of their party's candidates. Yeah, and again, we'll see. We'll see. It's out of our hands. I'm sure most people who are over, the age of 30, 35 know this, but there's a lot of people over the age, under the age who also know it. But then there's also people, again, you can't control. Loss is okay in a democracy. It's okay to lose, and so forth. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up today. Thank you to everyone who was on here. I saw up to about 4 or 5 different people. I'm sure people come up and down. Uh, Irish smart. Yeah, well, yeah, I don't like, one of the things in my journalism training was I had a lot of opportunities before I became an undergrad to write for politically biased and politically partisan publications online and stuff. And I don't know. I didn't want to do it. I don't like lying to people, This is just like, hey, like, Mark, what do you think about X? I think it sucks. I think it's great. I think it's dumb. I think it's bizarre, or I don't know. Anyway, I appreciate that, Irish. You're a good person. The US system was designed to be ineffective and slow. So, regardless, yeah. Yeah. Two-party system. You can't change anything anyway. But okay, everyone. So, have a good rest of your week. We'll be back on Saturday. I really hope you enjoy that one. I love talking about the Twilight Zone. Um, and we'll get into more of why. Again, we'll look at these things, and I will give spoilers. So, that's just par for the course from a 60-plus-year-old show, um, along with The Simpsons and along with, Star Trek: The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. I could talk about all the themes and everything until the cows come home. The cows will come home, though, on Saturday because I will have to actually finish the stream. Um, but in the meanwhile, please again like this video. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you over in Werewolves. And of course, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.